Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Thursday Sangha gathering. My name is Jody, and I'm the director of KTC SoCal. Happy to see you all here tonight. This evening's program is presented by Lama Adam, continuing his series on the wings of wisdom and compassion. You can find out more about KTC SoCal by visiting our website, ktcsocal.org. Additionally, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, KTC SoCal, to hear all of our past teachings. If you would like to make a donation to Lama Adam this evening, you can do so on our website. And if you would like to become a member of KTC SoCal, there is information on different levels of membership as well. And before I hand it over to Lama Adam, please mute your microphone so there is no background noise. Thank you. And we'll go for about an hour this evening to be respectful to Lama Adam since it's late for him. Thank you. And now I'll hand it over to you, Lama Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been staying up late these days. I'm on my musician schedule again. First, I just want to say thank you to KTC SoCal and particularly like Jody and the directors and everyone who works in an administrative sense. Lisa, it sounds like you're the new tech person. That's awesome. So thank you for that. I don't know if everyone here realizes like a Dharma Center is like an iceberg in the sense that like there is so much that goes on beyond just the programs. And I think everybody who does it hopefully at some point realizes it's a practice too. maybe the more serious practice, to be honest. So thank you for helping to bring this to everyone. And yeah, so today we are continuing the On the Wings of Wisdom and Compassion series, which I'm so glad to be able to. I was thinking about today about when I started, I got this idea, and I knew I wanted to do some Lojong teaching, and I knew I wanted to do it from Trungpa's perspective because I'd never heard that taught before. But I also like realized, and I don't know if you all have this experience or not, but any Lojong series I've been to before has always felt rushed in one way or another. Like definitely at the end, you know, like you kind of like you usually got like maybe 4 or 5 teaching sessions if it's a weekend and you're kind of trying to get through everything as quickly as possible. And so it's just been really nice to kind of just ease in and take as much time as each of these things take, even if it's taking a year. Like I think that's awesome. And so I've been really enjoying it and I appreciate getting to really go into this stuff. So thanks for that as well. And yeah, so I think before we dive in, I'll share screen and we can say the refuge prayer together. And we will say this once in English, once in Tibetan, and once more in English. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. O Sangye Chudang Suki Chodnama Changchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Daki Jinso Ki Pe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupasho. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. I'll say a short prayer of my own. O Baden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Nagi Chiwa Vediten Jula Kajun Chenpo Gone Che Sunte Usum Taking a Jup Sao Du So. Okay. So just to recap, We are studying the 7 points of mind training. That's Lojong in Tibetan. And we are doing it from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's book, Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness. And this classic body of teachings is itself a complete path to awakening. So I know Lama Kathy loves to tell people that Rinpoche told her, like, all you need is this. Like, there's plenty more options, but all you need is this. And I think, every teacher says things in a context, and so there's all kinds of causes and conditions behind all of these things. But when I think about that right now, like, all you need is loving kindness and compassion. I think of it in terms of all of the variety and availability of teachings and practices out there right now because of the internet and because of all of our interconnectedness through technology. And so I think lately, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is just how our FOMO, maybe, or how our like desire to like see the next thing is impacting our practice. I know in retreat, like, we were always kind of thinking, what's the next practice we're getting to? It'd be 9 months of this, but we'd be 2 months in and thinking, what practice is next? And it actually got me thinking this week as well about. I was driving down to Columbus to do to speak to a class at Denison, and I was listening to a Bob Dylan album I never heard called Planet Waves, because I've been listening to the band a lot again lately, and I didn't realize that was a band and Bob Dylan album. And so I was listening to it on the drive, this 2 hour drive, and I was having this experience that I haven't had in a while, because I realized I haven't been listening to much of any new music at all. And I realized, like, the different shade of experience that comes when you do something new and stick with it, stay with it. I mean, it's funny because I'm thinking also of, like, when I go shopping for clothes, like, I have this experience when I go shopping for clothes where I just look around and, like, none of those clothes are mine, so I don't like any of them. Like, they're all unfamiliar, so those aren't my clothes. And I think similarly with music, like, it takes a little effort for me to stay present with new music that I haven't heard before. And so I realized, like, that was how I was going to frame my talk to these students at Denison. Like, what is it that makes you stick around an extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds, maybe even like 2 seconds with something unfamiliar? Because that's something you can cultivate some mindfulness of. What is it that's making you stay? And I think some obvious answers might be like, oh, well, I know this band. I like their last album. Or my friend whose music taste is a lot like mine, they recommended this band. Or I like this beat. So there's a lot of different reasons we can come up with. All the ones I just mentioned, and I think a lot of the things we might come up with are based on some kind of evaluation or judgment or comparison. And ideally, I think we would try to do those things more just out of, like, openness and curiosity. And maybe there's another avenue where it doesn't have to be all about some sort of judgment or comparison. And I think that's a very practical way to cultivate mindfulness. When we're about to change the channel or turn something off, why is that? What would make us stay longer? If the reason we're leaving is all about judgment, is there some value in that moment and us maybe just opening up and being curious and seeing what happens when we stick around with it for a while? I think this is especially important now because those experiences with music are happening a lot more frequently on social media and stuff like that. I mean, if you're doing any kind of Instagram or anything like that, where you scroll, think about it. It's funny because I feel like you almost could turn Instagram into a mindfulness exercise if you stick through everything the whole way through and just stay present with it. I don't know if that's, like, always great, but the main reason I think this is so important is because whatever mechanism is happening, whatever habituation is happening, whatever judgment is happening that makes us stay, that's happening in our interpersonal relationships too. And maybe we're not as aware of it, but, like, when we meet somebody new, like, there's probably some same network in the brain that's kicking in and going, like, I want to swipe on this person. Like, let's just move on. And I think that's I think everyone probably agree that we're a little bit less patient society now, and maybe that's part of it. I'm just saying. So so I would kind of try to think. I would encourage you to kind of think about that. You know, what makes you stay with something, um, and particularly in the things that are, you know, interpersonal relationships is where the biggest impact is going to come from a practice like that. But I'm encouraging you to do it with the very low stakes things like music and social media, and just a way to transform those into a little bit of practice. So I jumped off from Rinpoche saying that loving kindness is the complete path to enlightenment. So I think to come back to that, these 7 points, the 7 points of mind training, are expounded through 57 pithy slogans that are intended to be repeated and contemplated and memorized, so that when they're needed, they simply pop into the mind, whichever one is appropriate for that time. And the principal practice of taking and sending, also known as Lojong, um, it's the principal practice of relative bodhicitta, as it's described in these teachings, is widely known and taught. So we've actually not spent that much time on it, because I think it's one of the things that almost everybody has had at some point if you've been around a Dharma center. And if you're watching this and you haven't tried tong-len, or you're curious about it, I taught it in the 7th class in this series. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can go back to the 7th and become familiar with the principal practice of tong-len. But I do want to briefly revisit the 3 seeds aspiration today. I've been doing this, I think, every class, because I think the 3 seeds aspiration is one of the more underappreciated and even misunderstood aspects of the principal practice of tong-len. It's described as the post-meditation practice, but you can do tong-len with the visualization and all that stuff as a post-meditation practice too. So they're both kind of post-meditation practices, maybe different approaches. So I'll share that aspiration now. And I added a graphic today. I was getting ambitious with Canva. And so here's the aspiration. And it is when facing difficult emotions, we would pinpoint, you know, a negative emotion, a difficult emotion that's happening. Difficult's probably a better word than negative. When we say positive and negative, of course, we're always referring to, does this lead to happiness or suffering? It's not an ethical judgment or value judgment. We're just, if it's negative, it's going to bring about suffering. So the aspiration here is like, if we say anger, may my anger contain the anger of all beings. By my working through this moment of anger, may I and all beings be free of it, and may we attain enlightenment, the complete freedom from anger. And why this is such a brilliant aspiration or saying to memorize, it accomplishes a lot of things. First of all, we acknowledge our experience without running away from it. So may my anger contain the anger of all beings. I mean, I'm just going to sit here with this anger, and I'm going to make the wish that it just wraps around everybody's anger and holds it in one place, and they don't have to feel it. We're also, and in that way, we're connecting our suffering with the shared challenges of all beings. So I'm going to be with this anger, recognizing that all beings have to deal with this. And that's a source of me generating compassion. The fact that everyone has to deal with this. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling something everybody feels. Nobody really wants to feel it. I'll take it on for everybody. We're also reminding ourselves that all things are impermanent, including negative emotions. And we're aspiring that our own suffering be a cause for all beings to be free of suffering. So this unpleasantness that we're going through, this suffering, we can turn it on its head and turn it into something positive that becomes a force for the enlightenment of all beings. And we're also recalling our ultimate goal, awakening, our full potential. That's with the last part. And may we attain enlightenment, the complete freedom from anger. And so to put this graphically a little bit, 3 kinds of objects we meet: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. All of this worth contemplating. Whatever we bump into is one of these 3. Our habituated response is generally, when it's pleasant, passion; when it's unpleasant, aggression; when it's neutral, apathy. And what we're encouraged to do with the three seeds aspiration is to take those objects, treat them with awareness and compassion, and that is an enlightened path. And here's the new graphic I put together. So we have you or me. We meet the three objects, and then it's almost like a switch. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but sometimes I think there's like a bodhicitta switch in me. It's an automatic switch though. Right now it sits one way, and if I like hold it, I can hold it up and turn the bodhicitta on. But when I let go of it, a lot of times it just flips back, like to distraction and self-cherishing. But I'm trying to get it so it becomes the default becomes on. That's what I'm working towards. So these two arrows departing from the three objects are kind of that switch. If we're not really doing anything and we're going with our habituated self-cherishing and distraction, those objects become poisons: passion, aggression, apathy. But when we flip that bodhicitta switch, treat those objects with awareness and compassion, then they become the seeds of virtue. So we transform them in that way. The thing to note here is we're still going to meet those objects. They're still there. We're still going to meet unpleasant things, and we're still going to meet pleasant things that get us wrapped up in our passions, and we're still going to meet neutral things. So this has been a meaningful aspiration for me. So I just want to make sure that it's something that we keep revisiting. And then moving back into the points, we are on point 3, which is transformation of bad circumstances into the path of enlightenment. And Trungpa here kind of breaks up this part into what each of the slogans relate to. So we have the relative bodhicitta slogans, which are drive all blames into one and be grateful to everyone. Then we have the ultimate bodhicitta slogan, seeing confusion as the four kayas is unsurpassable, shunyata, protection. Then we have special activities, which are the 4 practices are the best of methods, which we did last time. And then today we're going to start with this final slogan of point 3, which is bringing your experience to the path. And the slogan is, whatever you meet unexpectedly, join with meditation. And so that is the 16th slogan. And I'll introduce with a quote from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's Training the Mind. He says, in this slogan, the word join has the feeling of putting together butter and bread. You put together or join situations with meditation or with shamatha vipassana. The idea is that whatever comes up is not a sudden threat or an encouragement or any of that bullshit. Instead, it simply goes along with one's discipline, one's awareness of compassion. If somebody hits you in the face, that's fine. If somebody decides to steal your bottle of Coke, that's fine too. This is somewhat naive in a way, but at the same time, it is very powerful. Generally speaking, Western audiences have a problem with this kind of thing. It sounds love and lighty, like the hippie ethic, in which everything is going to be okay. Everybody is everybody's property. Everything is everybody's property. You can share anything with anybody. Don't lay ego trips on things, man. I added the man because it felt appropriate. But this is something more than that. It is not love and light. It is simply to be open and precise and to know your territory at the same time. You are going to relate with your own neuroses rather than expanding that neurosis to others. And so any situation you meet here is to be joined with meditation. Any situation you meet unexpectedly. And just to shed some light again on the word meditation, Gom is the Tibetan that's often translated as meditation. And Gom actually means to familiarize, to get to know, or to habituate. And I added pictures of people in dialogue here to kind of highlight the collaborative nature, of how I think these interactions should feel. We're getting to know a situation, like we're getting to know a person. We're familiarizing, maybe even habituating in terms of making our own in jokes, and the ways that we move when we're with somebody. We mirror body motions and things like that. So we're in this collaborative situation with a situation that we meet unexpectedly. And so whatever surprises we meet should join with meditation. And so one thing I was just immediately thought is like, well, why does this need to be said? Like, why do we have a specific statement here about things we meet unexpectedly needing to be joined with meditation? And so one thing to think about for just a second is, what do I typically do when I'm surprised by something unpleasant? Because if the encouragement here is to join whatever we meet unexpectedly with meditation, one object that could be unexpected that we encounter is unpleasantness. So what do we typically do when something unpleasant surprises us? And I'd encourage you to just contemplate this on your own, but think of an example of something slightly unpleasant that happened, and maybe what you kind of jumped into, where your mind went in that unpleasant moment. And I'm talking here about when you're not really paying attention. Like, what's our sort of habituated negative response to these situations? And then similarly, what do I typically do when I'm surprised by something pleasant? The encouragement here is, instead of our typical like self-biased reactions, the encouragement is to habituate towards taking and sending, habituate towards the practice of tong-len, or towards some sort of thought pattern that's like the three seeds. So one thing I realized this week, in terms of, since tong-len, taking and sending, and three seeds both can be used in post meditation or applied practice, I was thinking how I apply them, and I realized, like, I think when the momentum of thought is so strong that it's just tough to stay engaged with the visualization, that's usually when I go to the three seeds, because then I need to like think it out. I really need to kind of think through the whole thing. And to me, that's when three seeds is most useful. As when tong-len, or staying with the visualization, is just a little too hard because the situation's a little too intense. So I don't know if that works for everybody, but I wanted to share that's what works for me. And so, knowing that we're trying to join situations with meditation, familiarizing, getting to know them, and habituating in a more positive way, take a second just to revisit the unpleasant surprise you worked with earlier, and envision how you might habituate in that situation towards bodhicitta. And I think there's real power in doing these kinds of exercises, because you're sort of rehearsing. Like I used to, when I was playing music a lot, I would rehearse in the car when I was driving. I didn't have an instrument in my hand, but I could learn and practice stuff, and I think we can do the same thing with Dharma. So similarly, revisit the pleasant surprise you worked with earlier, and envision how you might habituate towards bodhicitta in that circumstance. So becoming familiar with our typical reactions to unexpected things, pleasant and unpleasant, in the moment of surprise is a really good thing. So the first thing to remember is not to ruminate on the lack of wisdom or skillfulness in our negatively habituated reactions. What I mean by that is, like, when we notice that we are thinking in a way that puts us in the center of the story and blames everybody else, noticing that is a good thing. Becoming familiar is good. Familiarizing is part of what we're talking about here with joining with meditation. So familiarizing yourself with what happens in that moment, even if it is that lifetimes long habit of responding with ourself as the center of the story, noticing is still good. I mean, this is the same mechanism as when we notice distraction in meditation. So noticing those habits is a good thing, and we come back. In this case, our anchor is bodhicitta. So we come back from that self-cherishing thought to the bodhicitta. And that is a good thing. And this is so important because we're trying to cultivate that noticing. So we don't want to vilify the moments when it's working. Like we want that there. And that's part of the irony about a developing practice of Dharma or meditation is as it's becoming more honed, you notice more and more of the divergences more frequently. They may be more subtle, but you're going to notice them more often. So it's actually a good thing. And the first thing to remember again is just not to ruminate or get upset about the fact that we have these negative reactions. We're going to change them in the moment. And in this context, we're learning that taking and sending is a positive avenue of habituation. In other words, it's an avenue that can actually lead to happiness for us and others around us, regardless of the feeling tone of the experience, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. So that reaction, that response might be tong-len, it might be a form of the three seeds contemplation. And so to join whatever we encounter unexpectedly with meditation, we must recall, which is one of the meanings of mindfulness. We have to recall that surprise is a powerful opportunity to A, familiarize ourselves with our negative, unmindful, habitual reactions, and B, actively habituate new mindful habits. And then a side thing I wanted to discuss, which Trungpa doesn't, but it got me thinking, like, why do surprises seem to carry such extra oomph? Like, what is it about surprises? And this deserves some contemplation. I mean, what I came up with was there's sort of a special energy, right, when things arrive unexpectedly. And we have like a heightened sense of mindfulness a lot of times. Like all of a sudden we're very aware because something unexpected is happening. And I think that heightened sense is actually a heightened sense of bardo, of interval. Like in that moment, we're recognizing like, oh, I'm in some kind of transition here. And it seems like this crazy, unique thing has all of a sudden happened. Oh, change, like, but in that moment, we're spotting the dynamic that's always flowing, that underground river. And so surprises pique our awareness that we're constantly in process. They connect us with the idea that our ground is in fact ungroundedness. And the heightened awareness can supercharge our positive impact if we habituate in that moment towards virtue. And specifically here, we're talking about habituating towards taking and sending, but we could really say any mindful practice is better than what normally happens in terms of self-cherishing. And for me, that's usually leaping into some monologue. Like when a surprise happens, it's leaking into some monologue, at least underneath that is like some sad attempt to reestablish my sense of self and being the center of the universe, not just my own universe, but everybody's universe. So that's kind of the habitual thing that I jump to if I'm not being mindful or connected very well with my bodhicitta. And it's generally like one of the things I love about the whole idea of bardo is that it is supercharged. Like those moments of bardo, when we think about the time between lives, or when we think about just periods of change and ungroundedness that are very strong in our lives, like they carry energy that can catapult us into incredibly positive results or incredibly negative results. And they're incredibly consequential. And so they literally are supercharged. So those moments of bardo, like knowing that has helped me numerous times in my life to recall, oh, there's some really strong surprise energy or unexpected energy happening here. And I maybe have this habit of labeling that as bad because I want to control and know what's coming next. But when I can remember, oh, this is actually super powerful and a huge opportunity, and I just need to practice. Like I just need to do what my teachers have been telling me forever. This is the time to do it, and it's really going to make a positive impact. So that unexpected word in this slogan really kind of grabbed me, and I think it's worth contemplating surprise and how you interact with it. And Trungpa finishes out this slogan by saying, obviously, there might be a problem when you first hear the good news or the bad news, the unexpected good news or bad news. At that point, you go, ah, and Trungpa gasped. That sort of ah is a sort of ultimate bodhicitta. But after that, you need to cultivate relative bodhicitta in order to make the whole thing pragmatic. Therefore, you practice the sending and taking of whatever is necessary. The important point is that when you take the worst. And when you give the best. So you don't take credit unless you've been blamed. I've been blamed for stealing all the shoes and I take credit. In some sense, when you begin to settle down to that kind of practice, to that level of being decent and good, you begin to feel very comfortable and relaxed in your world. It actually takes away your anxiety altogether because you don't have to pretend at all. You have a general sense that you don't have to be defensive and you don't have to powerfully attack others anymore. There's so much accommodation taking place in you. And out of that comes a kind of power. What you say begins to make sense to others. The whole thing works so wonderfully. It does not have to become martyrdom. It works very beautifully. I'm glad he said it doesn't have to become martyrdom at the end there, because I think that is the pitfall of this kind of a practice, is turning it into something it's not supposed to be, which is self-denigration or self-abuse. So then we move on to point 4. So point 3 is behind us. We're on to point 4, showing the utilization of practice in one's whole life. And Trungpa reminds us that these points relate to the paramitas. So the first point is related to the preliminaries, but then when we get to point 2, generosity and discipline are implicated in the associated practice of ultimate bodhicitta is related with generosity, and the principal practice of relative bodhicitta, discipline. Point 3 is related with patience. And this point we're beginning now, which contains 2 slogans, is related with diligence. So diligence or exertion. The word Trungpa is using mostly here is exertion. And he says that exertion basically means being free from laziness. He says when we use the word lazy, we're talking about a general lack of mindfulness and a lack of joy and discipline. So he also says we could discuss exertion in terms of developing joy and appreciation for what you are doing. It is like taking a holiday trip. You are very inspired to wake up in the morning because you are expecting to have a tremendous experience. Exertion is like the minute before you wake up on a holiday trip. You have some sense of trusting that you're going to have a good time, but at the same time, you have to put your effort into it. So exertion is some kind of celebration and joy, which is free from laziness. Exertion involves a sense of pushing yourself step by step, little by little. You are actually connecting yourself to the path as you are walking on it. Nevertheless, you are also experiencing some sense of resistance, but that resistance could be overcome by overcoming laziness, by ceasing to dwell in the entertainment of your subconscious gossip, discursive thoughts, and emotionalism of all kinds. The 4th point of mind training here deals with completing your training in your life altogether, from the living situation you are in now until your death. So we are discussing what you can do while you are alive and when you are dying. These 2 slogans are instructions on how to lead your life. And these 2 slogans, this is the first one is practice the 5 strengths, the condensed heart instructions. And Trungpa describes these 5 strengths as 5 types of energizing factors. And they are strong determination, familiarization, seed of virtue, reproach, and aspiration. And these same 5 are the topic of both of the 2 slogans, which make up the 4th point of mind training. The first slogan relates the 5 strengths to life, and the second relates them to death. So if we start with the 5 strengths, Trungpa says, that number 1 is strong determination. You're determined to maintain twofold bodhicitta. He also says practice is your way of strengthening yourself. The practice becomes the way you strengthen yourself. And he says, make it a point that you and the practice are one. And the example he uses is sometimes when you get up in the morning, particularly if you have had a late night or you've been partying, you feel very feeble, somewhat uncertain. Quite possibly you wake up with a hangover, feeling very guilty. You wonder whether you were foolish the night before, whether you did absurd things. You wonder what other people think of you and begin to be afraid that they might have lost their respect for you or that they might have confirmed your feebleness. You do a lot of worrying in that kind of situation. The idea of the first strength, strong determination, is that as soon as you open your eyes and look out the window, as soon as you wake up, you reaffirm your strong determination to continue with your bodhicitta practice. And you do the same thing when you lay down on your bed at night, at the end of the day, as you reflect back on your day's work, its problems, its frustrations, its pleasures, and all the good and bad things that happen. And he says, strong determination is connected with developing an attitude towards your practice that is almost like falling completely in love. So that's strong determination. Then we have familiarization. He describes this as bodhicitta becomes familiar ground. And even in distraction, situations become reminders to return to your practice. So remember what I said earlier about when you notice those negative habitual patterns, using those, recognizing that as a good thing. You'd see those as like a reminder. And that sort of recasts those things into your friends, and the world becomes a friendlier place when you see those types of things. Even distraction is a reminder to come back to bodhicitta, to come back to your practice. He also says dharmic subconscious gossip begins to eclipse ordinary subconscious gossip, which I think relates to the bodhicitta switch I was talking about earlier. I think the more you're getting to where your dharmic subconscious gossip is eclipsing the ordinary subconscious gossip, the more likely you are to kind of just default into a bodhicitta place. And the way he describes it here, he says, the second strength is known as familiarization because you have already developed strong determination. Everything becomes a natural process. Even if you are sometimes mindless, even if you lose your concentration or your awareness, situations remind you to go back to your practice. This is a process of familiarization in which your dharmic subconscious gossip has begun to become more powerful than your ordinary subconscious gossip. Bodhicitta has become familiar ground in whatever you do, whether vice, virtue, or in between. So you're getting used to bodhicitta as an ongoing realization. He also says the natural tendency of mindfulness awareness, when the concept of egolessness has already evolved in your mind, is to flash onto Dharma. You familiarize yourself with it. In other words, you no longer regard Dharma as a foreign entity, but you begin to realize that Dharma is a household thought, a household word, and a household activity. And then we have the third strength, which is seed of virtue. And I'll say a little bit more about this later, but some of you may already be noticing his presentation is pretty different than the other presentations I've read, particularly here. And I've got 5 books here and 2 more over there that I've been referencing just to like compare presentations. And his is very unique. I mean, his is kind of all on its own. And I want to give his take rather than like, reading all the others the way the other people do it, because here we're doing Trungpa's path here. So he describes seed of virtue. He says that number 3 is known as seed of virtue. You have tremendous yearning all the time, so you do not take a rest from your wakefulness. It means not taking a break from your practice, basically speaking, but continuing on, not being content with what you are doing and not taking a break. You do not feel that you have had enough of it or that you have to do something else instead. He doesn't say too much about it. That's basically what he says. So virtue, the other thing I would say from the slide here, virtue here means body, speech, and mind fully dedicated to propagating bodhicitta. And number 4 is reproach. Reproach, he says, is revulsion with samsara. And he says that sometimes talking to yourself is very highly recommended, but it obviously depends on what you talk to yourself about. And he says, in this case, you're encouraged to say to your ego, you have created tremendous trouble for me, and I don't like you. You have caused me so much trouble by making me wander in the lower realms of samsara. I have no desire at all to hang around with you. I'm going to destroy you. This you, who are you anyway? Go away. I don't like you. Talking to your ego, reproaching yourself in that way is very helpful. It is worth taking a shower and talking to yourself that way. It is worth sitting on the toilet seat and talking to yourself in that way. It would be a very good thing for you to do when you are driving. Instead of turning on the punk rock, just turn on your reproach to your ego instead and talk to yourself. If you are being accompanied by somebody, you might feel embarrassed, but you can still whisper to yourself. That is the best way to become an eccentric bodhisattva. And one thing I have to point out here, there's a lot of this comes up in the Lojong teachings, this idea of sort of personifying the ego and then repudiating it. And that is one of the main strategies presented in Great Path of Awakening and here. And I want to make a point that I'm a little bit uncomfortable teaching this part. And this is all me talking. But obviously, I'm not only a Buddhist in life. I have other interests and other things I do. And Dharma is hopefully part of all of them. But I learn from a lot of different places. And knowing that one of the most common extreme adverse effects of meditation is dissociation, I think it's worth noting that this, you should use this with care, and pay attention to how it's working for you. Dissociation is a general term for disconnection or disruption in a person's thoughts, feelings, memories, sense of identity, and perceptions of reality. And it can range from mild, which is like zoning out or daydreaming, to severe, being like a loss of sense of self or connection with consensus reality. And this is one of the more extreme adverse effects, but it happens. And I've met a number of people who've had this happen and for a long time and were really functionally impaired or had to go somewhere to have it treated, So this is really worth being careful when we kind of just sum up something as the ego and then talk to it like it's separate from us and is bad. I think there's value in it. It's worked for a lot of people over the years and it may well work for you, but I'm just saying informed consent. I think it's worth it to know that this is something to be careful about. And a little sidetrack on that, there's an interesting arc to how dissociation has evolved in the last 3 editions of the DSM. If you don't know, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And it's like a guidebook for doctors and therapists to identify and understand mental health conditions. And interestingly, in the 3rd DSM from 1980, it was when the dissociation was first formally recognized, and it first recognized that it could be triggered by meditation and spiritual practice. And it was acknowledged in that DSM that altered states of consciousness, particularly those in certain religious or meditative traditions, could lead to pathological dissociative states, such as depersonalization, derealization, amnesia. So in this 3rd edition, dissociation was mostly seen as a problem rather than an intended spiritual experience. Then in the 4th edition, it was refined to distinguish between pathological dissociation and culturally accepted spiritual dissociation. So it introduced the idea that some religious or spiritual traditions aim to introduce dissociative states, such as trance states or mystical absorption or identity dissolution. And this was important because it removed like the automatic pathologization of dissociation in spiritual contexts. So states experienced in shamanic practices, Sufi whirling, deep meditation, were recognized as intentional and sometimes beneficial. So the view in that fourth edition clarified that dissociation can be non-pathological if it occurs within a cultural and religious context where it is expected and controlled. But then we have the most recent edition, which is the fifth, and that integrated both perspectives. And it acknowledged that while some religious and spiritual traditions may encourage dissociative experiences, these experiences can become pathological when they spiral out of control. And it explicitly noted that some spiritual practices involve intended dissociative states, but emphasized that dissociation can become a disorder if it causes distress, impairment, or persists beyond the intended context. And it introduced the dissociative subtype of PTSD, which acknowledged that some people use spiritual practices to cope with trauma, which can sometimes unintentionally trigger distressing dissociative states. So dissociation in spiritual practice is not automatically pathological, but it can become problematic when it's unintended, prolonged, or distressing. And it happens. It really, really does. So just be careful, and know that the outcome of this practice is not to completely disconnect from your body or your sense of self or your reality. Like if that's happening, that is not the intended outcome. That would be an extreme, and this is the middle way. So we want to stay connected with both our ultimate and our relative aspects. So all of this to say that practice of kind of speaking negatively to this ego that we are conceptualizing as separate from ourself in that dialogue has its pitfalls. So just practice with care. And then our fifth strength here is aspiration. Our fifth strength is aspiration. And this is, he says, wishing, A, to save all sentient beings, B, not to forget twofold bodhicitta, and C, to apply bodhicitta in spite of whatever chaos or obstacles may arise. And then we get to the last slogan of this point, which is the Mahayana instructions for ejection of consciousness that at death is the five strengths. How you conduct yourself is important. And this is one of the significant differences between Trungpa's presentation and what we find in Great Path of Awakening by Jamgon Kongtrul, and also many of the other books, Trungpa Rinpoche, Dugu Khyentse Rinpoche, Pema Chodron, Chogyam Rinpoche. For this point, they tend to give these five strengths in a different order. And they're basically the five things you do at the moment of death. So in Great Path's presentation, as well as the other five books, we, instead of strong determination, we start with seed of virtue by giving all of our things away. And then we make an aspiration to never be separate from bodhicitta. We repudiate the ego. We generate the strong determination that will never be separate from bodhicitta. And finally, we familiarize by doing tong-len until our last breath. So that's what we do until we go. And like I said, Trungpa's presentation here differs from that. He doesn't change the order. And he starts out really by emphasizing the recognition of impermanence and the truth of suffering as an essential first step to understanding all of the Buddha's teachings. He says, all of us will die sooner or later. Some of us will die very soon, and some of us might die somewhat later, but that is not particularly a reason for relaxing. So he really says we need to make friends with our death. He says, people usually try to ignore their death completely. If you say to somebody, do you realize that you could die tomorrow? That person would say, don't be silly, I'm okay. That attitude is an attempt to avoid the fundamental ugliness existing in us. But death need not be regarded as the ultimate ugly situation that happens to us. Instead, it can be regarded as a way of extending ourselves into the next life. I like that idea. I'm going to read it again. But death need not be regarded as the ultimate ugly situation that happens to us. Instead, it can be regarded as a way of extending ourselves into the next life. In this case, death is seen as an invitation to allow this thing we cherish so very much, called our body, to perish. We shave and we take showers and baths and we clothe ourselves quite beautifully, or somewhat beautifully. On the whole, we try to take very good care of this pet called our body. It is like having a little puppy. We don't want our pet to die, but this little pet called our body might leave us sooner or later, will leave us sooner or later. So to begin with, we have to realize that anything could happen to any one of us. We could be very healthy, but we might not die from ill health. We could die from an accident, could die from sickness, from terminal diseases of all kinds. And sometimes we die without any reason at all. Although we have no external or internal problems, we just suddenly perish. We run completely out of breath and drop dead on the spot. So the point is to familiarize ourselves completely with our own death. And he goes on to share the story of the Kadam teacher that many of you have probably heard, who would turn his cup over before he goes to sleep at night, which is a story about, like, I guess that was signified that you would be out of the house for a long time because you would turn your cup over so dust wouldn't collect in it. And it cued for me this reminder. I can't remember if this came from a Dharma context or not, but this idea of sleep being like a tiny death. You know, as far as we're concerned, we kind of just go away, you know, when we go to sleep. We're kind of just gone until hopefully we wake up in the morning. And so I like this idea of like turning over the cup. And it got me thinking, like, that's such a simple thing to do that is very profound and takes like no time at all. And it got me thinking, is there something I can do in my life like that? You know, if it's just turning a cup over, you know, or I don't know what it is yet, but I just want to introduce this idea as another thing to kind of contemplate. Is there maybe it is just turning a cup over that you use or something, but is there some kind of thing you could do like that or add to your practice that is quick and simple, but every day is reminding you of the fact that death is coming. It's coming, and that birth has just occurred when you wake up. And isn't that wonderful? Here we are. We can practice, we can see each other like each morning, turning that cup over and going like, I get to do it again, you know? So I haven't figured out what that is for me yet, but I think it's worth figuring out. And Trungpa reminds us that the slogan is connected with the paramita of exertion, which we know from earlier is a sense of joy in our practice. And death is an important part of our practice. We're all going to die, and Trungpa says this slogan is about how to die from the basic point of view of our own practice. And to close out this slogan, he says the instruction for how to die in Mahayana is the 5 strengths. So we have the 5 strengths or the 5 powers once again. Because these practices are very simple, and because this is the same list we just discussed, we don't have to go into them in great detail. Applying the 5 strengths is this connection. In this connection is very simple and straightforward. He says strong determination, number 1, is connected with taking a very strong stand. I will maintain my basic egolessness, my basic sanity, even in my death. You should concentrate on twofold bodhicitta, repeating to yourself, before death and during the bardo, in all my births, may I not be separated from twofold bodhicitta. Familiarization is developing a general sense of mindfulness and awareness so that you do not panic because you are dying. You should develop the strength of familiarization, reminding yourself repeatedly of twofold bodhicitta. The seed of virtue is connected with not resting, not taking any kind of break from your fear of death. It always has to do with overcoming your attachment to your belongings. Reproach means realizing that this so-called ego does not actually exist. Therefore, you can say, what am I afraid of anyway? Go away, ego. Recognizing that all problems come from ego, all death is caused by ego, you develop a revulsion for ego and vow to overcome it. And the last one, aspiration, is realizing that you have tremendous strength and desire to continue and to open yourself up. Therefore, you have nothing to regret when you die. You have already accomplished everything that you can accomplish. You have done everything. You have become a good practitioner and developed your basic practice completely. You have realized the meaning of shamatha and vipassana, and you have realized the meaning of bodhicitta. If possible, you should practice the sevenfold service or puja. But if you cannot do that, you should think, through all my lives, may I practice the precious bodhicitta. May I meet a guru who will teach me that. Please, Three Jewels, bless me so that I may do that. Beyond all that, there is an interesting twist. The ultimate instruction on death is simply to try to rest your mind in the nature of ultimate bodhicitta. That is to say, you rest your mind in the nature of alaya and try to pass your last breath in that way until you are actually dead. All right. Thoughts or questions? Anybody have a good idea about what to do that's like the cup? Does anybody have like a cup? I do. This is my cup. I use it every day, but I don't know where I would put it that I would remember to turn it up and down and see it. Anybody have uh, thoughts or anything come to you when we contemplated like surprise or unexpected responses to unexpected situations? Yeah, Jared.
Um, I think both with because I've started a new job, which is an old job, but it's what I've noticed in coming into new environments is that um, I it's kind of a neat thing because I try to integrate the Dharma and what I've been taught, which is um, with tong-len, which is really helpful. I practice every day. Is just take an interest in others and show up like, oh, what am I going to do? And it's just like, dude, you don't have to do anything. Just show up and ask questions. So there's a part of me that gets a little scared. It's like, oh, I don't want to talk. It's like, what does it matter? It's just like, and it's funny because I see all the little games my ego plays, and it's just like, oh my God, that's so funny. It's like, dude, just do your level best and nothing will actually happen. And so it's like I show up for work and I'm just like looking around and I was like, well, the basic thing of going to the back, checking in, saying hello to people, meeting new people, introduce yourself. But it's just like my heart's just going like, oh my God, what do I do? And I'm like, wow, even at my age, I still feel like a child. It's like you walk into kindergarten, it's just like, oh my God, all these little kids,
Yeah.
what am I gonna do? And I'm just like, wait a second. I'm 47. Haven't I done this like 1,000 times? Like, why am I forgetting all that? So I find it really kind of refreshing to go through those experiences or walk into a new store. And like you said, one of the things that I, I do shopping as well as I walk into a store and I'm like, none of this. Well, my mom will be with. She's like, oh, what do you want? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea because it's like the same thing. It's like these aren't my clothes. I don't know what to do with them. And so, but like, but I see my mind kind of going off like that. But when I just sit there, I'm like, okay, take a breath, realize you're in a dream. Just take it slow. What'll work? And then it's just like my fashion sense starts to emerge, and I go, well, let me start with this pair of pants. Oh, this shirt will look good next thing you know. My mom's like, that's a nice outfit. I'm like, yeah. It's like, so I find it really neat. But I also um, in the was it the 7 points where you're talking, it kind of reminded me more of like what striving to be like Milarepa, who
Mm.
studied so often and going to bed and that, and I'm just like, yeah, strive for that, but you got to be kind to yourself and take it slow one day at a time. Because yeah, like the Dharma, especially through meditation, has really helped me see how when I go to bed, I'm like, oh, this is so great, and I try and do the Om Mani Padme Hung before I fall asleep, realizing, because I've contemplated all that, short life, all this, this precious, it's all back there. Um, but it's at times I find very, I'm not habituated to it yet, even though I've been doing this for, I can't even remember how long. It's been a very long, like when I was a middle teenager. I've been doing this at different stages. And so it's, to me, it's just like, oh yeah, I got it. There's trying to turn it around and be friends with it, but saying, oh, there's a lot more opportunity and opportunities to practice. Like, we're going to be doing this for a long time. So just familiarize yourself with it and let go. If you don't remember, don't worry about it. I'm keeping the main points with me. So I just wanted to share that I have enjoyed your talks and these little lessons as a reminders, because little other things come up. But yeah, I don't. It's funny. My ego's like, "Oh, you're a great practitioner." I'm like, "No, dude, I'm a simple as I can't even remember. Wait, where did I put my shoes? Oh, shucks!" Or I like walk out like I can't. Oh, these are not my work shoes. Oh my god, I'm still not mindful. So anyway, I just want to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me know I'm not alone in that my clothes shopping experience. And I think maybe the next slogan or the one after it is, of the two opinions, trust the primary one slogan, which is basically like, don't worry about what other people say about you, you know. But I also was thinking, there's got to be a way. You got me thinking about a potential graphic of some kind, because I think there's a couple different, I don't know if vector is the right word, but there's a couple different things that are at play when we notice a habit. um, and one of the factors, I think, is that in the beginning we always notice what we did that was, maybe not in alignment with our Dharma practice, like pretty far after we've done the thing. There's like some time goes by and we look back and we go, oh, that was a bad choice. And then as we practice, I think that time moves closer and closer to the event itself. So we notice sooner and sooner afterwards. And maybe even like right after we say something, we go, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that." And then I think there becomes a time where, and now I'm not talking about my realization. I'm talking about when I used to play bass, because I think it was the same experience. But there's a time where, as the mistake is happening, you notice it. Like literally, as it's going on, or as the words coming out of your mouth, you become aware, like, "Ooh, this is not the best choice." And then hopefully you can kind of change it before it actually meets with the rest of the world. Um, and then I think it gets to where it goes to the other end, to where you start to notice that mistake coming on, and you're able to head it off before it even gets close. And so that's one of what I'm calling a vector here. I guess the other one is like, how strong or how intense the event is, because that's also going to have an impact. I think we're much likely to notice beforehand a mistake when it's a low, not very serious situation. But if it's big, charged, emotionally charged situation, it's a lot harder for us to notice that mistake earlier. Yeah, I feel like I'll make some graphic about that one. But is vector the right word for that? Anybody here know? That, like, the line of things that affect other things? I'll ask ChatGPT afterwards.
So,
I like
sounds
your graphics. So the graphics help. I like your presentation. It helps.
Oh, thank you. Good, good. Yeah, I'm a visual learner. I remember slides years later, like what the slide looked like, or the picture, or
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Good, thank you. Well, any other thoughts to share before we wrap up for tonight? This, by the way, is Lake Erie. This is my lake. I just moved back up to the Cleveland area, and
I love it.
it's beautiful.
It's
Yeah, I mean, and
amazing.
actually, let me see if I can show you. This is what it looks like in the summer. But I was out the other day, and this is what it looks like now.
That's
It's frozen,
amazing.
solidly frozen.
Wow.
And there's this really unique phenomena. I'd never seen it before. I've seen the lake frozen before, but I went to the beach, and I don't know if you can see in the back here, these like ridges. It almost looks like cliffs before you get to the flat lake
Can you
itself.
show it again? I'm not seeing it for some reason.
It's behind me right
Oh,
here.
how gorgeous. What's the temperature
Yeah.
there?
It is just under freezing. So right now we're about 30, 29, 30.
So not
But
too
these little,
cold. It
not
looks
too cold. It's been
gorgeous.
0 or so. I think it's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I love it even in the winter. But these little ridges here, I'd never seen it before. It's strange, because that should just be a slope down into the water. It's a beach. But so it took me a while to figure
Wow.
out like what happened. And I was like, oh, that's because as the lake is freezing, the water's coming up, it's mixing with the snow. the chunks of ice in the water are bumping up against the snow, and they make these like sand and ice, like basically like bluffs or cliffs. They're only like 3 or 4
Incredible.
feet high, but isn't it cool?
Beautiful. And
Yeah,
you
thank you.
like
This
your
was 2 days ago.
place? Your new
Yeah,
place?
yeah, I'm comfortable. Yeah, I'm spending some time with my mom as she's getting older, so I couldn't
Oh,
be in a
that's
better
great. So
situation.
you're
Yeah.
nearby. Are you living with
Yes.
her or just
Yes.
nearby?
Yeah. Two
Oh,
things
that's
came together
great.
that were really good. One is wanting to be closer to my mom, and the other one is wanting to really devote my time to what I've been trying to do, which is develop a moral injury prevention plan and to write a book about that. And I realized that like the creative phase, you never get paid during the creative phase itself. You just cross your fingers that maybe once it's done, there's some kind of income. So I realized like I just had to take the pressure, some financial pressure off, and get to a place where I
Excuse
can
my
focus on learning.
naivete. What is moral injury exactly?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, it's closely related with dukkha, I think, is one way to say it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's basically like when someone meets with a situation that deeply challenges their sense of self and their sense of like what's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it often co-occurs with PTSD, but the difference is that in moral injury, fear doesn't have to be the driving emotion. A lot of times it's things like shame or guilt or disgust,
Of
you
course.
know, but it has a lot of the same symptoms. And so one of the reasons why I want to work on it is because I clearly, if it's a fixation on self issue, meditation can help. And nobody's really addressing that. Moral injury itself is a growing field. It's I don't think it's the right name. That's one of the things I'm working on, is if there's something else to call it, because I think moral implies immorality, and I don't know if I don't think that's right. But that's the word that's most accepted right
Well, in
now,
a
and I feel like
sense it is, because it's kind of a new ethic or lack of ethic emerging out of the quote unquote culture of narcissism, right?
mm, but I don't know if narcissism is necessary predecessor to it, but there is some sense of like not having the tools to integrate one's own views with the situation in the world. Like lacking the coping mechanisms or the adjustment mechanisms to integrate a high stakes surprise. Actually, it's funny, it relates with what we're talking about today, because it's usually something very unexpected that occurs. And yeah,
Well,
yeah, it's
it
worth
seems
looking
like
into.
we're living in like a free fall of every day having something unexpected in the world.
Yes. And that's why I think this couldn't be at a better time. And the plan is, because I'm doing it through my nonprofit, to support social service workers, community advocates, activists, because it's tough to stay in the game when these things are coming fast and furious. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to put in the chat one of the books I'm reading right now, that I would recommend, because it's really been interesting for me to read this book. It's about soldiers. It's called Warriors Between Worlds. I think the subtitle is like Identities in Crisis. And it's
Warriors
about
between warriors or warriors between
sorry,
worlds?
Warriors Between Worlds. Yeah, sorry, I was typing
Okay.
and thinking. Um, but yeah, it's about soldiers returning from war, but and how they like learn a whole belief system and context in boot camp, and then come back, and there's no real training for how to adjust into civilian life. And it struck me, everything about it is resonating in terms of meditation and retreat for me, because similarly, there's like a 2-month program to train us for 3-year retreat, and then at the end the door just opens and you walk on out. And I still think myself and a lot of my retreat mates are trying to adjust still. So but I think
How long
it's relevant
ago,
to anybody.
Adam, did you leave retreat and re-enter
2020, right
the
when the pandemic
mundane
started.
world? Wow,
Yeah, we got out on March 9th of 2020.
incredible.
And that was not because of the pandemic. That was just when it was scheduled to end. Pretty
Right,
amazing.
because if you had scheduled it perfectly, you would have done it during the pandemic.
Well, yeah, I
When
mean,
there
it was
was no
scheduled to end on
life.
March 9th. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, but we got out right in time. I think they probably would have ended the retreat, I would imagine. I don't know what would have happened. And that would have been a total bummer, like hanging out for 3 years to finish the 3 years in 3 months, and then they canceled the last month or something. Um, it wouldn't have been our fault, but I think it probably would have
They
always stuck
didn't
with me.
maintain 3-year retreats during COVID.
No, they stopped for about 2 years. I think the retreat, there's one
Wow.
male retreatant now, and I think maybe 4 or 5 female retreatants. And they started,
Where?
I think they're in their second year at Carmeling, which is about an hour from KTD, Delhi, New York. Delhi, one of the great American mispronunciations of another culture's words.
Ojai, New York. I didn't know there was an Ojai in New York, and I'm from
No,
New
no,
York.
Delhi. It's spelled like Delhi, but it's
Oh,
Delhi.
Delhi.
Yeah, it's
New
with
York.
there's other words like that, like Buena Vista in Colorado. That's what everybody calls it, Buena Vista, but it's of course spelled Buena Vista.
Oh, no, I'm not familiar with that area either.
Yeah.
Lama, Adam,
Mo-
maybe you'll write a book
Mhm.
about getting out of retreat and into the world and what that was like. That'll be
Yeah.
your next
That
book.
had to be a huge
Mhm.
adjustment going back into mundane life, COVID or no COVID, you know?
We'll
Yeah.
look forward to
Yeah.
seeing that title soon. But thank you for tonight.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all. It's such
And,
a pleasure to be here.
yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you all next Thursday.
Oh, let's dedicate the merit briefly. I'll just chant it. Make the aspiration that our time here today is for the benefit of all sentient beings, that they may all achieve perfect enlightenment. And as Lama Kathy says, radiate out in all directions, benefiting beings. Sunam di tamche shipani topne nepe janam tamje ne kega nachi valap chupai sipe sove jowa sho. Okay, thank you. See you all
Everybody,
soon.
Thank you,
You
Adam.
all.
Thank
take
you.
care.
Good night.
Night, Lama.
Good
Adam.
night.